Imagine waking before dawn. It's cold, your stomach is empty. 14 hours of hard field work lie ahead, and on the table you're greeted by this. No meat, no sugar, and certainly no coffee. Today, we'll live one day alongside a medieval peasant and find out what they actually ate. Spoiler, it wasn't like in the movies. A medieval day began very early, at first light around 5 in the morning. There was no electricity, so people lived by the sun. Daylight meant work. Darkness meant sleep. But here's what will surprise many. Breakfast, as we understand it, was almost non-existent for peasants. In fact, eating a hearty meal before prayer was considered gluttonous, even sinful. The church discouraged eating before morning service, so a peasant usually grabbed something simple on the go. The staple of the age was bread, but forget the white, fluffy loaf. A poor man's bread was dark and heavy, made of rye or barley. The grain was often coarsely ground, with bran and husk still in the flour, which made the bread dense and long-keeping. In lean years, they bulked out the dough with pea flour, beans, chestnuts, or even ground acorns, anything to stretch the supply. Baking was typically done once a week, sometimes in a communal village wood stove. To get flour, you had to mill the grain at the Lord's mill and pay for the service. Yet another reason to economize. Such bread might be eaten with a bit of cheese, an onion, or simply on its own. They didn't wash it down with water. People feared water. It was often contaminated and could make you ill. Instead, they drank weak beer, table beer, or small beer. Almost non-alcoholic, but safe. The water had been boiled, and fermentation suppressed harmful microbes. It was the everyday drink for everyone, and yes, even for children, who had an even weaker brew. An average peasant household drank up to 4 liters of weak beer per person per day. In the south, some might dilute with wine. In the north, cider or pear perry might appear. But for most, small beer was the norm. In cold weather, they might grab a ladle or two of warm gruel or pottage, just a few spoonfuls, and hurry to the fields. By noon, after several hours of labor, came the day's most important meal. The centerpiece was pottage, a thick soup made from whatever was at hand. Cabbage, onions, turnips, carrots, beans, peas, sometimes leaf cabbage, kale, or leeks. It all simmered in a single cauldron. That cauldron might stay over the fire for days, even weeks. Water and ingredients were added as needed. The flavors shifted with the seasons. Spring brought greens and wild herbs. Summer, the garden's bounty. Winter, dried and salted stores. There were no potatoes. They wouldn't arrive in Europe until after the discovery of the Americas. So, the backbone was turnips, cabbage, and legumes. Grains played a role too. Barley or oats were used to thicken the pottage, turning it almost into porridge. Bread sometimes doubled as a plate. A slab of yesterday's loaf served as a trencher, soaking up juices before being eaten, or fed to the animals. How did they season it? Costly spices, pepper, cinnamon, cloves, were for the wealthy. Peasants used what grew nearby: onions, garlic, mustard, parsley, dill, caraway. For acidity, there was vinegar or verjuice, the sour juice of unripe grapes or apples. Salt was precious and used sparingly. As for fat, perhaps a spoon of rendered lard or a scrap of bacon for aroma. What about meat? A luxury. A cow meant milk, a hen, eggs, a pig, future lard. Slaughtering animals at random was wasteful. Meat appeared on major feast days, or when an animal was old. Much more common was fish, salted or dried, especially for those living near rivers and coasts. Vast barrels of herring and cod traveled trade routes across Europe. And don't forget the church calendar. There were many fasting days, by some counts over half the year. On those days, meat was forbidden, and fish and plant foods formed the basis of the diet. Sometimes a sliver of smoked pork found its way into the pot, not for substance, but for flavor, to smoke the pottage. Dairy appeared as soured milk, clabbered milk, buttermilk, and whey. Nothing went to waste. People ate with wooden spoons. The knife was personal. Forks weren't yet common in everyday life. And again, the drink was small beer, more caloric than water and safer too. After sunset, the workday ended. Home was a timber hut with a smoky hearth. Supper was often reheated leftovers of the same pottage and a slab of dark bread. Sometimes there was cheese, an excellent way to preserve milk without a refrigerator. Curds were set with rennet or acidity, then pressed and salted. Peasant cheese was hard and salty, keeping for a long time. Butter was rarer. It required a lot of milk, and milk was primarily drunk or turned into cheese. With luck, there might be eggs or a few fruits from the garden: apples, pears, plums, wild berries in season. In autumn, dried apples and pears and nuts. Something sweet? Sugar was scarce and costly, but there was honey. It sweetened porridges, was diluted into drinks, and sometimes became a simple, weak mead. In some regions, people drank mild cider instead of beer. As for the sweets, we know there were virtually none. For a child, a treasured treat might be an apple or a spoonful of honey. For adults, comfort was a warm bowl of pottage after a long, cold day. Did they have enough to eat? In a good harvest year, yes. Simple but filling fare. Bread, porridge, legumes, vegetables provided energy. Researchers estimate a working peasant consumed 3,000–4,000 calories a day. Understandable, given heavy labor, cold winters, and long hours on their feet, but there was a terrible enemy: crop failure, drought, a cold, rainy summer, war, or disease, and stores vanished quickly. The most famous example is the Great Famine of 1315–1317. Failed harvests, soaring prices, widespread undernourishment. People turned to substitutes: pounded tree bark, acorns, leached to remove bitterness, wild greens and roots. In some years, survival depended on fish or on alms from monasteries. Taxes and dues made things worse: the tithe to the church, obligations to the Lord, the miller's fee. Poor bread, with fillers, coarsely milled, became the norm. In damp years, ergot and rye caused poisonings that made people ill. In such times, peasants truly walked a knife's edge between life and death. So, the takeaway. One day in a medieval peasant's life meant a slice of dark bread and weak beer instead of breakfast, a thick vegetable pottage with grain at midday, cheese and leftover soup for supper, and meat only on major feast days. Modest? Perhaps, but this simple food fed Europe for centuries. Could you make it even a single day on such a diet? Tell me in the comments. If you found this interesting, please like and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. There, we'll discover what kings ate, and the contrast will amaze you. Thanks for watching. See you next time.